Welcome, everyone, to Real Estate 360 Live. I'm your host, Brian Sloper. For those of you not familiar with the program, my guest and I will cover every angle of real estate under the sun, from interest rates to the economy to what's happening in Washington. Anything that affects our local real estate market will be covered here. If you got any questions, whether it's regarding to getting your credit fixed so that you could potentially buy a home, if you're looking to refinance to the lowest rates in U.S. history, and you're looking for the best lender to contact to get you, a loan recommendation, I can help you out with that. The best number to reach out to me is 877-245-2030, 877-245-2030, or visit us at the web at realestate360live.com. That's realestate360live.com. And make sure that you join us every Monday at WNEW 1580 AM from 2 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Remember, if it's real estate, it's covered here. Got a big show lined up for you guys. A lot went on last week in the markets, as I'm sure many of you know. The Fed the Fed came out and has chosen to go for round 3 of quantitative easing. Joining me on our panel today to discuss this big issue, as well as many others, is Louis Cammarosano, who is the general manager of HomeGain. Louis is often cited in the media as an industry expert in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, CNN Money, Fox Business, Smart Money, MSN, and numerous others. Like I said, we're going to talk about what happened in the markets last week, as well as what's on deck this week that can affect you and your real estate decisions. Louis, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm just grand, Ryan. How are you?
You know what? I'm feeling great. I'm feeling real great. But outside of that, I am just completely bothered by everything that's taking place in the markets.
I'd have to agree with you, Ryan. I think it's insanity.
Yeah, literally. I'm actually kind of queasy thinking about it. You know what I mean? Because it's like, just like you said, insanity. We're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And the only thing that's changing is that the banksters and the rich are getting richer at the hands of the poor.
Those are my thoughts exactly, Ryan. I was thinking I was going to call it double insanity. One using your definition, the classic one from Einstein. QE1, QE2 didn't work. Keep trying the same thing over and over again, and it doesn't work. But there's another definition of insanity in this one. It's a dumb idea to begin with. It's not going to work. Just printing up money to pump up Wall Street and the housing market to create this. These are Bernanke's words. A wealth effect. It's illusory that somehow people think now they're richer. They're going to go out and buy stocks and they're going to go out and buy stuff. And somehow by inflating these asset prices artificially and deflating the dollar, that's going to make the economy better and give people jobs. Yeah. Now, if you came up with that scheme, you'd think that was insane. It'd be like if a casino decided the way they were going to boost their revenues, they were going to print up more chips and hand them out to all the casino patrons. And who's that going to help? Well, the casino could say we got more revenue because they spent more when they were in the casino, and it's going to help the gamblers. But really, it's illusory. You can't just print up money and say now we're all richer.
No, not at all. And we're gonna take a lot of time and kind of break down a lot of. There's been some interesting articles that I've pulled for today's show where we can kind of go over some different things as far as like what's the projected timeline of how this is going to affect people overall. Obviously, Louis, you and I both thought that they might hold off until after the election.
We didn't realize how crazy they actually are.
Yeah, they're
really how bad the economy is. It was an admission that the economy is not doing well, and they needed to take immediate action.
Yeah, and for those of you not familiar, last week Bernanke basically came out and gave an open-ended commitment to buy $40 billion a month of mortgage-backed securities, which initially lit a fire under investors they started selling a lot of treasuries and started buying heavy into the mortgage-backed security market. So what happened at first was that, mortgage interest rates, they got lower once again, as if I didn't think they were going to go much lower. Now, not as much as we would have thought they would. They should be into the 2% range. Once again, the banks at this point in time, they're not going to be passing on much of the gains that we're seeing in the interest rate market to the consumer. It's going to more or less pad their pockets even more at this point in time. So it was last Thursday. The 10-year note had felt the pain at this point. The yield on the 10-year increased 20 basis points. As opposed to the 30-year Fannie Mae 3% coupon increased 73 basis points from the close on Wednesday. it's going to be really interesting to see what happens going forward from here, because we're at a point in time where, how much lower can the rates go for it to even make sense for the banks to lend, period. And, the other reason why I said I was getting a little bit more queasy, Lewis, is because then I read another article coming out from HUD, which it's already passed in the Senate, that there's a proposed that FHA can increase their annual insurance premiums up from the current 1.25% to 2.05%. Okay, so every time that we're given this news that things are getting better and everybody should be able to take advantage of these interest rates, then you have HUD, who in May, 1 in every 5 loans were an FHA loan. Okay, now they're proposing that they raise the annual insurance premium from 1.2 to 2.05. What is that going to do to the person's payment? It's going to shoot it up. Any gains that we're getting in better interest rates going to be offset by, the future legislations where they continue to change and have the cost of home loans go up.
Right, this is all the unintended consequences of government interference in the market. If you recall what they did by boosting up the housing bubble, it was to make homes affordable for everybody and to get everybody into a home. And what ended up happening at the end of the bubble, fewer people had homes and the price of homes went down.
Yeah.
You cannot boost the economy artificially without expecting it to crash later on. And it looks like this QE3, or let's call it QE infinity, is designed to create another wealth bubble by pumping up the stock market and pumping up the housing market all over again, instead of relying on and creating an underpinning for the economy that's based on savings and then productions. Instead, they're just handing money out, really, by printing up more money, trying to make it easier to buy things on credit and hoping that that's going to work. It's just going to create another mini bubble, which can't get as big as the last bubble. And it's not going to work. I don't even know why they even bother to try. And you're right. I don't understand why the markets cheered, other than, I guess, they realize the economy is so bad, the only place to put your money is in to the stock market, and at least if it boosts the stock market, you might be able to stay ahead of inflation instead of buying treasuries. And why buy treasuries if the Fed will buy them for you? Although they're not buying treasuries in this particular round, they're saying they're buying mortgage-backed securities.
Correct. It's interesting, Lewis. There was an article by Mike Adams of Natural News. The title of the article was "Infinite Quantitative Easing: The Final Chapter of America's Financial Blowout Has Begun." And I thought it was very fitting. He talks about early on in the article that basically, there's actually up to $85 billion in monthly money creation that can take place, including $40 billion a month in purchases of actual mortgage-backed securities. So, the worst part about this thing is that he's not even given definitive numbers or a timeline. This can go on for forever. And the fact that he's basically going to allow for this type of thing to take place, who's to say that the $85 billion doesn't end up turning with the inflation prospects, where we're 6 months to a year down the road, where now all of a sudden they're printing $200, $300, $400, $1 trillion a month.
That's the worst thing about this, Ryan, is it's open-ended. Even Keynes, who was a believer in money printing and having the federal government boost through stimulus when the economy wasn't working well. But here what they're saying is they've already done 2 major asset purchases through QE1 and QE2. That didn't work. And now they're saying, you know what, we just have to keep this as a perpetual policy, that we're always going to try to keep interest rates low and to prop up the economy through money printing. Even Keynes wouldn't agree with that.
Yeah, and it's to say that people are going to feel like everything is going great because we have a low interest rate environment, but everything else about the overall economy is the same, if not getting worse. QE1, QE2, did it help the employment situation? No, it did not. Did it help housing? No, it did not. Have we seen any sort of leniency for people that are trying to obtain home loans or business loans or personal loans? We haven't.
You know what the counter argument to that's going to be? It would have been worse if they didn't do all this.
You know what? I'm not so sure. You know what, Lewis? Maybe it might have been a bit worse. Maybe we would have had to go through. Yeah, exactly. Go through a year and a half of struggling to come back on the other side. But it's better than what's taking place now, which is running us into the ground.
You have to rebuild the economy from the bottom up through savings and production. You can't keep piling debt on top of it and hoping it gets better. And if that doesn't work, put even more debt on top of it. If that doesn't work, say we're going to continue to do it forever. Because that's basically what the scheme is.
Absolutely. You're listening to Real Estate 360 Live. I'm your host, Ryan Sloper, joined by my guest, Louis Cammarosano. We're talking quantitative easing, and Chief Fed Ben Bernanke, obviously, it seems that, Ron Paul had a great comment that was the country really should have panicked over what the Fed is saying, that we have lost control. Bernanke is saying and trying to put the onus now back on Congress that they have to get their fiscal house in order to save us from basically a financial collapse. Well, does Bernanke not see that what he's doing is basically setting us up for the failure?
It's a classic example when you have two parties that are wrong pointing the finger at each other. And, one is wronger than the other, I guess, is what he's saying. He's been reckless in his monetary policy, just as reckless, if not more reckless, than the Congress has been with their fiscal policy.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
It's interesting, Ryan, you said at the beginning, I don't know if it was a slip or not, but you said Bernanke ruled that we were going to have, you corrected yourself. You said he chose, but you're correct in that characterization. This is the most anti-democratic way of allocating capital that you can imagine. One guy decides, and he's got 11 others agreeing with him, or 10 others out of the 12, that this is what they're going to do. In effect, it's anti-democratic, and he rules that here's what the price of the dollar is going to be, here's what interest rates are going to be, here's who's going to be helped by this, and as we mentioned, who's going to be helped? Those with existing debt. Who's that? Governments and banks. And debt to be incurred, so they're encouraging a certain type of debt to be incurred, which is housing. And who's going to be hurt? Savers, elderlies on fixed income, and everybody else who relies on their money to retain its value because, in effect, this is inflationary and reduces the purchasing power of the dollars in your pocket. All done by fiat.
Yeah. And, as I've stated numerous times, and I'll continue to state, there's never been one fiat currency in the history of man that has not become extinct at some point in time. And what Bernanke is doing is he's speeding up the time that it's going to take for us to get to that breaking point.
What's interesting, Ryan, is it's probably right now the most abused currency of all time.
Yeah.
In other words, resorting to the printing presses for this period of time and in these amounts are staggering.
Well, they've stated that this is probably would be the largest disaster ever once everything pans out. But they would they in that same article that I was discussing, they give the same examples, and you had brought up examples of Zimbabwe and a bunch of other countries that had tried to basically stimulate their way out of the recession that they were in, and it didn't work. Peru, Yugoslavia, Zimbabwe. There's numerous ones. I mean, just to give you an example, Peruvian government decided again to replace the currency, this time with the Nuevo Sol at a rate of 1 billion to 1. So at some point they're going to have to change our currency or what it's tied to. And how's that going to work? And who is that going to hurt? It's going to hurt everybody. It's going to hurt everybody except for the people that own gold and other commodities that they have some sort of value at that point in time.
And let's bring it back to real estate and those who hold debt.
Yes.
Those whose debts will basically be inflated out of existence. Those people holding mortgages where they owe, let's say, $400,000 or $500,000. That'll be but a pittance to pay back in inflated dollars. So bringing it back to real estate, who it does help are those who are in debt, which obviously are the largest sovereigns who owe trillions of dollars, but also the individuals who owe money and the individuals who owe money now and those who will owe money in the future, meaning those people who are either smart enough and or liquid enough or lucky enough to be able to get a loan at these rates to purchase a home. Because in the future, it'll be very easy to pay back that loan in inflated dollars.
Absolutely. And, you bring up a great point we discuss this week after week, Louis, is that, if there is a silver lining in all this, and I'm not even really saying that it is, but for people out there that have the ability, the capacity to be able to take out home loans now, whether it's for your primary residence or if you qualify to be able to buy second homes, investment properties, and everything else, it's a very solid opportunity for you to take advantage of the low interest rate environment to protect yourself from this future inflation that, is on the horizon. We have some analysts that are saying that, we could have a financial collapse by Christmas of this year. We have other ones that say by, April of 2013. And, many others that are saying, typical Ponzi schemes like this can typically take much longer for them. That bad end result of basically a dying currency to take place. But whether it's this Christmas, next year, 2 or 3 years, inevitably there's going to be a point where we cannot fix the situation at all. It doesn't matter.
It's interesting. You're right, Ryan. But what's interesting is that generally, if the currency were to collapse, it would be because people could somehow go somewhere else. So, for example, when the Argentines have gone through their inflationary periods and their currency collapses, the people have held their money in dollars, and people rush to dollars. Right now, there's in all of currencies that have collapsed, there's always been somewhere to run to.
Yeah.
There's always been an anchor. Right now, the anchor itself is the U.S. dollar and the euro, and they're both involved in inflationary money printing. So it's really hard to tell what's going to happen because the two anchors, the euro and the dollar, are the ones that are engaged in the inflationary practice. And I guess you can say the only safe havens could be gold, silver, commodities, and real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. We're up on a break, Lewis. When we come back, we're going to dive into what Donald Trump feels about QE3 and what he thinks this is going to do for our country. When we come back, stay right there.